Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Brian Kelly. I'm the Director of Communications, and I'm just here to walk you through the information. Up first, we have a welcome and introduction from Nicholas Fletcher, who is the Peace Corps and Alpha Phi Alpha Incorporated Partnership Coordinator. Brother Fletcher, please.
Thank you, Brother Kelly. On behalf of the C2C College to Corporate Life Committee, would like to thank Peace Corps for hosting this afternoon's webinar. And I have the honor of introducing our speaker, Miss Carmen Mazera. She is the Executive Director of the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs. One of her previous roles and responsibilities was the Assistant Director for Education and Outreach at the Atlantic Council for the United States. She's written and provided interviews for CNN, CBS, Forbes, to name only a few. She's a graduate, of American University of both her undergrad and graduate schools, and had the honor of being considered the 2008 Rising Star alumni and receiving such award. Considering our topic this afternoon of how to select and apply to graduate school, we are extremely fortunate to have Carmen as our facilitator.
Thank you. This is Carmen Mazera. Brian, is there anything else you all wanted to say before I get started?
Absolutely not. Please move forward. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, hopefully everyone can see the PowerPoint presentation up on your screen. And as we go through, if you have technical details or questions, please be sure to post that in the chat box that you see as part of the GoToMeeting module. So I am delighted to be here and to talk to you about how to apply and select the graduate program that is going to be the right fit for you. And what I'll do is walk through different steps along the timeline in terms of the application process and materials and the discernment aspects of figuring out what to do. We'll talk a little bit about financial aid. We'll talk a little bit about career prep and figuring out how to build the strongest resume possible and use a graduate degree to propel yourself forward. And then we'll open it up for Q&A. So let's get started. Like many things, this is going to take you at least probably a year. And it all begins with that initial discernment process. Figure out what programs you're really interested in and what kinds of schools are going to help you meet those professional goals and needs. We'll talk in a minute about how to do that and different sources of information, but really the whole process begins here and being honest with yourself about what you're interested in and how different schools and different programs are going to get you to that goal. We also strongly recommend, as you go through all of this information and try to keep track of all of these different pieces, that you create just a simple spreadsheet that will enable you to track what's due, when it's due, and how you're doing in the process. Because there's going to be a lot of details you need to keep track of. So just something as simple as a Google Doc or an Excel spreadsheet can help keep you on your path. This far out, you're also going to want to start to look seriously at your financial situation. Where are you? How much can you afford to take on in terms of debt? What can you afford to pay for? And what financial aid options are available? Starting this early will put you on the right path and enable you to plug in those deadlines to this spreadsheet you're going to create and really help you run the most efficient and effective search for both graduate schools and financial aid options. So now that it's a year out, let's say, and you're trying to figure out what comes next, how do you know what program is going to be the right fit for you? And I would suggest that there are lots of different sources of information in this journey. First and foremost, of course, are the people around you, your faculty, your mentors, your brothers, your family, alumni of your college and university. All of these different people are sources of information about what kinds of programs are going to meet your needs. So I encourage you to take advantage of them and to talk to them about what possibilities are there. And after that, once you've heard from these different audiences, then you need to start to do a deeper dive into the kinds of programs you might be interested in. Look at how the programs are structured. Are they sequential? Do they require you to first do one thing and then another? Is that appealing to you? Are they flexible? So if halfway through or after the first semester you really change your mind or change direction, do you have to start over, or can you redirect that energy you've been using into continuing with the program in a different way? Think about also the different admissions representatives at all of these schools and how they are also a source of key information. This is their job, is to talk to you about what the right fit is. And there are lots of different opportunities to bring them up on the phone. They do webinars regularly about their programs. We here at APSIA, which is what we call our association, hold fairs around the globe. There are lots of other fairs in cities and towns where admissions reps are there to hear from you and to answer your questions. That's really what they want to do so that both sides can find the fit that's right for them. And most importantly, you need to find that's right for you of your own professional goals. A master's degree in many ways is distinct from an undergrad degree because it's about being a springboard into a professional career. One of the things I always recommend to students is to read job descriptions for positions that you're not yet qualified to obtain, but that will help give you some of those milestones along the path. So as you look at jobs that just sound cool or sound like they would be something you would want to dedicate your life to doing, take a look. Do they all say you must have an MBA and 10 years of experience, or you have to have a master's degree and speak fluent French or Swahili or whatever? As you start to look at more and more of these descriptions, you can piece together the different kinds of building blocks you're going to need for your professional trajectory, and then compare it to the programs you're looking at. Does a particular program offer you opportunities to learn Swahili? Is it going to be the right fit to do a Master's of Arts, a Master of Science, an MBA, a JD? All of that is rooted in the kinds of professional opportunities you want to pursue after your degree. And part and parcel with that is all of the factors that are important to what's going to work for you, to your own success. And I list here on the slides a few of those options. The location. Do you like a big city? Do you like not so much of a big city? Do you want to be able to go hiking on the weekends or out to dinner with your friends? Or do you want someplace really remote, really international? All of that is going to contribute to the experience you have in grad school. And so it needs to be considered as part of the factors of your success. Similarly, what kinds of internship opportunities, what kind of job market opportunities, how does that school set you up for success in that career you want to pursue? So as you look at programs and are trying to figure out to where you want to apply, each of these is a different piece of the puzzle, and a lot of it requires that kind of internal self-reflection as well as external information gathering that needs to happen about a year out so that you can really start to sift through all the many grad schools and different grad options to figure out where you want to apply and what's right for you. So now that you've done all of that wonderful sifting, you can start to seek out specific schools' admissions counselors to talk to them about their programs. And one question that I always recommend students ask is, what are the priorities of the admissions committee? What are you looking for? And we'll talk a little bit about that later, but that's something I encourage you to pose to each of the school reps you talk to, because that will help you also sift through and figure out what kind of school is the right fit. Also, as you begin to narrow in on programs, understand what their prerequisite courses are and what kinds of skills you need to be a competitive applicant. As you can, try to complete those prereqs at least 9 months out. And if you like, we can talk a little bit about how you can pick up some extra skill sets if you don't already have them. Similarly, as you start to look at your own competitiveness, think about what your weaknesses are. Talk to your faculty, talk to others. Think about the assessments you've received from different programs or courses along the way, and try to find ways to make up for those weaknesses. If you know you're not good at public speaking, if you know you're not a very good writer, now is the time to start to improve those things so that when it comes time to turn your application materials in or to speak directly to admission staff, you're just in a better space. 9 months out, we also recommend you start to take any standardized tests that might be required, the GREs, the GMATs, any of those different pieces. If you're not a native English speaker, the TOEFL exam with certain caveats might also be required. So now is the time to take them 9 months out so that you can really have a good long lead time and make sure that you can put forward the best test scores possible. 9 months out is also when we encourage you to start to gather all of the different application materials because it's going to take a while to get the many different pieces together that you're going to need. As a quick overview, and hopefully you all can see this, I've run down a few of the standard things that are required in an application. Every school is going to be different. I can't stress this enough. Every school is going to have their own distinct application requirements, but this list is just as a whole some of the common things that you'll see. You'll see an application form, an application fee. You'll need to turn in your resume. If it's an international school, it might be a CV, and they are different things. You'll need transcripts from every institution you've attended. If you were a high school student that took a college course and have it on your record, you're going to need a transcript from that institution. That kind of thing takes time, so be sure that you plan ahead to get all of those pieces in place. As I mentioned, you're going to need your standardized tests, you're going to need your personal statements and your essays, and we'll talk in a minute about how to really construct a strong essay. You're going to also need some letters of recommendation, and we can talk in a minute too about who makes a good recommender. And then on the financial aid side, you might need bank statements, either yours or if someone's going to co-sign for you, their bank statements and financial positioning as well. So starting early and doing the research will help you understand what each school is going to need, and then you can start to compile these pieces. So now that you've done this whole discernment process and you've started to really narrow in, you're 6 months out, and you need to start to really finalize your list of desired programs. Where exactly are you going to apply, and what specifically do they need? This is also the time to start to think about who's going to be a good recommender for you. It's time to update your resume if you haven't done that in a while. The essays and the personal statements are going to take a while if you're going to do them well. So this is the time to really start to spec out what you want to say in each of these different components. It's also a time to request your transcripts from, again, all of the institutions you've attended. And as part of that spreadsheet that you started to develop 6 months out or 12 months out, you're going to want to create a financial plan. How are you going to pay for the different aspects of grad school? Most grad schools are 2 years at least, so you need to plan all the way through and think about the first year as well as the second year, and anything else you would want to do, like intern or work or study abroad, that's going to fit into that overall framework of your grad school experience. 6 months out is also when many scholarships might have deadlines. So because you did all the research in 12 months and 9 months, now here at 6 months before the application deadline, you can really start to look at outside scholarships. And if you didn't do as well on your tests as you wanted to, you still have time to retake them so that you can present the best materials possible. So these are, again, 6 months before the application deadlines, most of which are in the fall. So you're looking now at to begin to put all of these different pieces together. And as there are some things that you should do, and there are some things, we talked a little bit about transcripts, and we've talked about how you need to submit them for every course listed in your application. We also talked about the need to do all of transcripts, recommendations, essays as early as you can. That when it comes close to the deadline time, you can focus in on the things that need to be done at the last, prepared early for all of these pieces that can be done early on. When you look for recommendations, and you're going to look, uh, think about who is best able to talk about you and work, and who can talk about it well. This is usually a professor, a supervisor, someone who has seen you in a professional and an academic context. Unfortunately, this is not a family member or a friend of one that you're a wonderful boy who's done nothing but the committee is really not going to evaluate that seriously as a professional recommendation. I would also stress that someone who can really speak to you, done, and how changed in your aptitude for success is going to be much better than someone who might have a famous name. I think a recommendation from a supervisor who's seen your work and seen your growth is going to serve you better as the committee looks at your application than a letter from, I don't know, President Obama, who might say, Bob is a very nice guy. That high level, thin, superficial recommendation doesn't carry weight no matter whose signature is at the bottom. So I think those are the kinds of recommenders that will best deliver for you. And you can best help them with that when you talk to them explicitly about what you want them to say. Give them some guidance. Tell them about the program you're applying for. Ask them to stress or to highlight certain things. I know when I write letters of recommendation, the best ones that I'm able to put together are when the student empowers me by saying, this is a program that really focuses on quantitative analysis. Can you talk about my analytical skills? This is a program that really wants someone like this. Can you talk to them about how I do that? Those sorts of connections enable me as a recommender to write a letter that's going to highlight what you want to highlight. So I think looking at your references and thinking about who can best write a complex letter that puts you forward in a positive way is really going to serve you well. And look to your personal statements. Clear and honest, direct language that shows your critical thinking abilities. That's the kind of stuff that committees look for. And we'll talk in a minute about what sorts of questions you might want to answer. But we also encourage you to be honest and to be forthright and to not worry about what other candidates are writing and not worrying about what other candidates are saying. Talk about you. The admissions committees want to know about who you are. They don't necessarily want to know what some famous person once said about global change or business or any of those different pieces. They want to know about you because you are the candidate to their school. One thing I can't stress enough too is to avoid the stupid mistakes where you can. In that clear and honest and direct essay that you're going to write, avoid stupid things. Avoid comma mistakes or grammar mistakes or spelling mistakes. The power of a computer is that you should be able to avoid most of those things, but it never hurts to have a second pair of eyes on it to make up for your perhaps repeated reading or over prep for a particular essay. So what should you have in your essay, and what should you be doing 3 months before an application deadline? So you went through this discernment process, you narrowed in on your schools, and now you're going to really start to compile what each particular school will need, because each school will need different things. You're going to start to really write out your essays and your personal statements that you outlined before. And here are just some general questions that I encourage you to answer in your personal statements and your essays. Talk about why you want to study this, that discernment process that you did, what your experience is, and how this particular degree is going to set you up for success longer term, why you want to look at grad school now, and what you want to do with this degree once you have it. All of that journey that you're on in terms of discernment and study and then profession, that is what a committee wants to see as they're looking at your essay. They also want to see it from your recommenders, so be sure to check in with them and make sure that they're on track and know when your deadlines are. And then you're going to want to revisit that financial plan and revisit any outside scholarships so that you can continue to run on that parallel track of applications for schools and applications for financial aid. All of this is going to start to happen about 3 months before the deadline. So now you're 1 month before the deadline, and you need to start to put all of the final pieces in place. You're going to want to make sure you have all of the information needed for each school, all of the information needed for each scholarship and aspect of financial aid. You're going to want to check in with your recommenders once again, make sure they've either submitted their letters or are going to by the deadline. You're going to want to keep up to date with that financial plan to make sure that, again, you're on track with all of the different pieces you need to have in line once your application has been submitted and the consideration process begins. And then comes that fateful moment when you finally submit all of the requested materials to each of the schools. And as a rule, there are some mistakes that are very easy to avoid if you pay attention. First and foremost, when you submit those materials, follow instructions. If the instructions say submit 3 letters of recommendation, submit 3. Don't submit 2, don't submit 5, submit what they asked for. You're also going to want to ask for multiple copies of some external documents. These schools have tons of applications every year, and sometimes a piece of paper gets lost. So when you check back in with that school and they say, we don't have your transcripts, if you have extra copies on hand, you can get that turned around much faster than if you have to, again, go back to the issued it and request it and go through all the paperwork. Also make sure that your recommenders get their stuff in on time. People get busy and they don't always have everything done on the deadline speed because it's not as forefront in their mind as it is in yours. As I talked earlier, avoid stupid mistakes. Spelling errors are one, but one of the most common mistakes that I see is when students are submitting essentially the same essay to multiple schools, but they don't read as carefully as they need to, and they say, I would like to apply to the University of Denver. And it goes to the University of Pittsburgh, and the University of Pittsburgh says, okay, well, you should apply to Denver then, and they have no need to consider you because you screwed up. So these are very simple things that are easy to avoid because you've done all of that compartmentalization by each school several months out, and you've asked other people to take a look at it. Sometimes another pair of eyes who have no personal attachment to the prose that you've put together can really be a good test. Ask your roommate, ask your brothers, ask your significant other, ask a parent, ask a professor, someone around you to just take a look from an outside perspective and read through that essay. Do they see things that don't make sense? Do they interpret something that you've written in a way different than the way you meant it? Make sure that they too can double check and say, okay, this is going to the University of Denver and it says the University of Denver on it. All of those different pieces that need to fit together. And finally, do that self-assessment again. Ask yourself honestly about your skills and your experiences and your interests. Because this is about what you want to master, it's about that professional development program. Look carefully at the schools to which you're applying and your skill sets and make sure that you're really putting forward and investing the time into a program that's going to work for you. Also, as you look at these essays and as you talk to admissions staff, think about perhaps some gaps or some hiccups that might have happened in your life trajectory so far, and think about how to address them. If you had to take time off of school to care for a parent or a family member, if you had a rough time integrating into college life and perhaps didn't succeed as well as you wanted to as an undergrad, talk to the schools about how you can discuss those issues. And without oversharing or apologizing for the life that you've had, try to talk about what you've learned from that experience, how you've grown, how you've changed, how that has made you the kind of person that you are today. Because that too is part of that honest self-assessment that committees are going to want to see as you put together an application to be a part of their program. So you've been through this whole process and you've read all these materials and written and had recommenders and gone through that whole rigmarole, and now you've applied. First thing I encourage you to do, certainly, is to confirm that everything you think you sent has actually been received. As I mentioned, we often get thousands of applications to different member schools, and we need to make sure that all of the different pieces are there. Also, don't forget to thank the people who wrote letters of recommendation for you. Not only is it a service that they've done, but you never know when you're going to need those people again down the line, or a school might connect with someone like that, and you want to make sure they feel appreciated for the time and investment that they've done. Again, you want to keep updating that financial plan, because that particular track doesn't stop when the application materials have been submitted. And last but not least, you want to continue to learn about the different schools to which you've applied, because you're going to have another decision point down the line once you've gotten into different schools to finally select the one you want to attend. So the discernment and the research and the learning process doesn't end when the application is sent in. So that was just a very high-level timeline of all of the different steps from 12 months or more out up until that fateful day when you click submit and turn in all of your materials. So once all of that happens, what are the schools looking for? And it really is a holistic evaluation process. No school is going to solely focus in on your grade point average, your your GRE scores, your work experience. They want to understand all of the different pieces that make up you and all of the different pieces that make up that class that they're putting together. And here are just 4 of the different things they're going to look for. They're going to look for your aptitude for academic success. It's a school, after all, an institution of higher learning. Can you succeed in that environment? They also want to see if you're going to be able to succeed when you're done with the program. Do you have a clear sense of professional direction? That goes back to the essays that you've written. And how does this fit into a larger plan that you might have? They're also going to look at all of these different factors and see what kind of success you will have in their program. They don't want to set students up for failure. They want you to succeed just as much as you want to succeed. So as they look at a candidate, that's one of the questions that they're asking themselves. Is this someone who's going to do well and succeed in our program? And similarly, they're asking themselves if this is someone who has personal experiences and perspectives that are going to help other people succeed. Most of our schools, all of our schools, certainly want to bring together a class of students that can help and feed off of each other. So if everyone is the same, if everyone comes from the same life circumstances and background and had the same experiences, that doesn't help anyone grow. It doesn't help them prepare professionally, because the chances of that happening in the working world are incredibly slim. And that doesn't help broaden their perspective about how the world is and how the world works. So that can certainly be an asset to you as you talk about what different experiences and perspectives make you distinct and will enable you to contribute to that broader class and to succeed down the line as you move into professional life. So all of those different pieces come together as a school is evaluating the applications they've received for a particular year. And that might help you also to steer the kinds of things you highlight in an essay or in a personal statement to help show you can be a good part of that puzzle. Now, of course, once you've applied for schools, and as we talked about, as you go through the whole application process, you need to look at how you're going to pay for your education. And there are lots and lots of different sources of funding. The best well-known, of course, is merit and need-based aid, and this can take the form of lots of different things. It can be a grant or a scholarship from the institution. It could be federal work study, a teaching assistant, a research assistant, a graduate assistant to a professor, graders, tutors, all of these different pieces, many of which are school-based, can be part of the financial aid package that will be put together for you. The Central University also might have a special award or a fellowship that they offer to students with these characteristics, whether that's a geographic region of the world that they're from, demographics, religion, it covers all bases in terms of what kinds of scholarships and funding can be available. Some universities also will provide loans directly to students. There's also funding that can be borrowed from banks and from the federal government. Some of those may require co-signers, and that's why all the way back at 12 months before you apply, you want to start to look at how all of these pieces fit together so that you can think about external and internal sources of funding, scholarships, merit-based aid, all of those pieces and how it's going to enable you to fund your education. One important note that I would stress is that students need to understand what is a gift and what needs to be repaid. Some students find themselves in trouble because what they thought was a gift is actually a loan, and schools might come calling or a lender might come calling 2 years later and say, where's my money, with interest. So be sure you understand exactly for what you're applying and exactly what the parameters are before you take on any external debt. I would stress, though, that this is good debt to have. This is an investment in yourself. This is an investment in the future. This is not at all taking on debt for debt's sake. This is truly an investment in what you can become and use as a springboard to future success. So, where are some other sources of funding? I list here on the slide a variety of different fellowships, many of which, as you can see, are linked to careers with specific agencies. I've pulled out some of the ones that are particularly connected to federal hiring. So as you can see, there are fellowships that link with them professional careers in the Foreign Service at the U.S. Agency for International Development. One of the key ones I would draw to your attention is the Coverdell Fellowship that is linked to Peace Corps service. All of these are tied to students who really want to use their degree in a variety of fields for a broader call to service and leadership within this community, within our global community. And the last program that I would bring to your attention is the Public Policy and International Affairs program, which helps students in their undergraduate careers prepare for success at graduate school and brings with it different funding opportunities for graduate programs. And what the so-called PPIA, Public Policy and International Affairs program, also enables you to do is build up some of your skill sets professionally to be a more competitive candidate for graduate school. And I'm happy to answer questions about PPIA later on as well. But as you can see, there are lots of different funding opportunities. But with those also come some do's and don'ts. Just like with an application to study itself, always present your strongest possible self. Look at what kinds of undergraduate and post-undergraduate work experience you can put forward. Even need-based aid is often linked to what a funder might consider merit. So putting the strongest application forward with a lot of experience and self-reflection is really going to make you the most competitive candidate for financial aid as well. You also need to have a serious conversation with yourself about debt. How comfortable are you and how much debt can you take on for graduate investment? That's going to be a question that really only you can answer as you look at your own level of comfort, as you look at your own experience as an undergrad, and as you look at your own future trajectory and hiring possibilities. And as I said, it's a very worthwhile investment, but it needs to be one that you're comfortable with. Because we've stressed this long-range planning, I'm sure none of you will miss those financial aid specific deadlines, but it is important to note that they're often quite different from the educational or application deadlines. So be sure in that spreadsheet that you create, you're tracking both at the same time, because you don't want to miss the one because you're focused on the other. You also don't want to wait until you hear back from a school before trying to seek out financial aid and fellowships. They have to happen simultaneously, because once you get the green light for admittance to a school, you're going to need to move on financial aid as well. And as I said earlier, you need to take into account the whole spectrum of your graduate level study. Just finding a scholarship or just doing the financial calculations that enable you to pay for your first year doesn't help you by the time your second year comes around and you need to finish your program. If you need to study abroad or intern in another city or in another country to set yourself up for success, those are all of the costs that you need to take into account when you're looking at what it's going to cost to go to grad school, how much debt you're comfortable with, and what sorts of funding sources you need to take into account. And in addition to all of that, you also need to take into account what it's going to cost to live in this particular place. Unlike an undergrad degree that may have room and board built in, on the graduate level, some may have a dorm setting, but most are going to require you to have your own apartment. What does it cost for transportation? What is the cost of living in the city where your grad program exists? To use my earlier example, if you're applying to a school in Denver, it's got a different price calculation than if you're applying to that school in Pittsburgh, both of which have a very different cost calculation than if you're applying to a school in New York or DC or Boston or Paris. All of these different pieces need to be taken into account when you look at the full experience that it's going to be a grad student. So think about all of those different pieces when you try to put your financial plan together and when you start to put that initial planning spreadsheet together. So in particular, one of the questions I often get is, what is that future trajectory when you come out of graduate school? I would encourage you all to understand and to think about how many different aspects of our life today, business, communications, education, agriculture, energy, all of these different pieces have an international aspect to them, and how those different pieces are woven together in a globalized community. So you, regardless of the sector in which you're interested in, understanding how the world works, understanding how all of these different pieces fit together is a fundamental aspect of being a competitive candidate. And as we look at how you can be competitive for grad school, again, in any sector, as well as scholarships, as well as just general professional success, there are several things I would encourage you to think about and to try to develop skill sets in. First, of course, is your professional experience. How have you been exposed to the way the world works, to people in different places, to those different connections in business, in communications, in politics, in education? How do those different people think and work, and how do they behave professionally? I'd also encourage you, if you don't write well right now, think about how to improve that. Many of the essays that I read, many of the that cross my desk, are not constructed in a way that gives me great confidence students can express themselves well on paper or in an email. So being someone who writes well enables you to distinguish yourself from many of your peers and your competitors. Similarly, being comfortable in front of an audience, or in this case, in front of a webinar, knowing how to speak comfortably in front of a group of people is a skill that you're going to need whether you plan to be an IT guy, a CEO, a doctor, a politician. At some point, everyone has to stand in front of a group of people and express themselves. So grow comfortable with that now, and particularly as the world gets closer together, learn how to do that across cultures and across languages. In the same way, understanding how to manage a project, how to manage a budget, how to do analysis of what's worked and what hasn't is the kind of skill set that translates regardless of the career path that you find yourself on. Understanding how money moves, how to get it, how to give it away, track it, all of those pieces need to for businessmen and teachers and doctors and politicians and educators and folks like me who run NGOs. Every job has some aspect of that. And in the same way, every job has some aspect of networking and interconnectivity. And this is where your connections to your supervisors, to your peers, to your professors, to the alumni who are either part of your school or institution, of your fraternity, or if you've done something like the Peace Corps, who part of the returned Peace Corps volunteer family, all of those different pieces come together to be your network that you can use and leverage and draw upon as you try to figure out how to be competitive and how to be successful. And in particular, I did want to talk about why and how the Peace Corps can deliver all of those skill sets that I just talked about. And as you can see on this slide, the Peace Corps offers exposure to so many different sectors. So those of you who are interested in a wide range of things can find that professional experience, can find that cross-cultural or language or project management experience, whether it's in agriculture or business or health or education. As you can see the breakdown here on your screen, there are many different ways to plug into the Peace Corps and many different ways to help that they can help you be competitive. There's also preferential treatment for graduate school. In many different schools will view Peace Corps service as an investment of credits, as an investment for financial aid. It really can help propel you to the front of a lot of the different aspects of the application and the financial aid process. Even once you've completed your service, they have a lot of career support and do get some preferential treatment in federal hiring so that you can rise again to the top of the application pool in certain areas. We talked a little bit about financial aid and debt, and I know that that's often a particularly serious consideration for undergrads, but Peace Corps service also enables you to be eligible for deferment or forgiveness in some cases. So it can help build that whole pipeline of professional skill development and being competitive for future funding while also helping you with the funding and the debt that you might have also taken on. Two other aspects that I think are great benefits to the program, and it's probably important to note that I don't work for the Peace Corps and I'm not a Peace Corps volunteer, but I just think that it really helps to deliver on a lot of those different avenues of being competitive that I talked about. But you do get financial support, a living allowance, a readjustment back to the state allowance, and what I think is distinctive in particular is you get things like medical and dental coverage and vacation time, which a lot of jobs straight out of school will not provide for you. So there's a lot of different touch points that Peace Corps service will give you and enable you to stand on a solid footing to propel yourself into grad school and from grad school into future professional success. So I'm going to wrap up there. And the last thing I want to share with you is where you can go after this for some more information. APSIA and all its member schools, which are dedicated to the professional teaching of international affairs in all of those different areas that I talked about, business, communications, politics, energy. Their profiles are available on our website on the link that you see. You can also follow us and the Peace Corps on Twitter. You can find us on Facebook. You can find them on YouTube and Instagram and all of those different sources. If you'd like to keep up to date with us and find out where our admissions reps will be to talk one-on-one in person, you can join our newsletter. And then if you would like more information on the Peace Corps, its application process, and particularly that fellowship that I mentioned, all of those links are on your screen. And I believe you can download the entire presentation after this through the GoToMeeting website. So with that, I will turn it back over to my colleague for Q&A.
Thank you, Carmen. I just want to also make sure, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you have any questions, please place them in the chat area on your screen. And also, if you go under materials, you can download a PDF of this presentation for your future reference. We're also recording this presentation, so hopefully you'll be able to view this later. Right now, I would like to turn everything over to Brother Asayas Orta, who is a diversity specialist with the Peace Corps and a brother of Alpha Phi Alpha. Sorry, Brother Asayas, I had you on mute. Now you are ready to go.
Alrighty, wonderful. Thank you for that. As he just said, my name is Asayas Warrington. I'm the diversity specialist here at the Peace Corps and also a proud brother of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. So thank you very much for that presentation, Carmen. Now we're going to move into the question and answer portion. So please write down your questions. Once I get your questions, I'm going to read them aloud for Carmen to answer. So far, we don't really have any questions, so we'll give you some time to think through it and get back to it.
Carmen, typically, what kind of questions do you have about joining joining a school or anything like that that usually comes up after your presentation? Anything at all?
No, no, I don't think so at all.
I'm sorry, I hear someone's, there's a lot of background noise from someone, so I did that.
Sorry about that. Oh, we do have a question. One of the Mr. Michael Patton said, "What are some key differences between the MBA and the executive MBA, and are they viewed the same in industry?"
An executive MBA is typically a program for someone with considerable work experience, someone who is many years, 15, 20 years into their career and returning to school for a graduate program, and they want to apply some of that professional experience to get credit. So it might be a shorter program that is more focused on key executive level skill set building, as opposed to a traditional MBA that might be more for someone who 2 or 3 or 5 years out of school and coming in after more junior level profession, the degree that way. Difference between the two.
Yep.
Carmen, you talked a little bit about careers and international affairs. Can you elaborate a little bit more in terms of how, say, me getting an MBA could constitute a career in international affairs, or say public health, or whatever it may be?
We're talking about
Sure.
public.
And I would suggest that it's not just an MBA that will set you up well, but there's certainly an interest in having folks who are trained in the business mindset apply those skills on a global level. So we typically talk about 3 broad areas of professional life. So public service, where jobs with the government may greatly value the business experience, whether it's in promoting trade, in running a business proposition, in connecting different businesses or supporting business training to advance economic growth. All of those are different areas that can happen in in public service on the international level through groups like the Peace Corps or USAID or the State Department. There is also in other countries, and other entrepreneurs grow in other places to share knowledge and the business development skills that you've obtained through an MBA on the ground to support smallholder farmers or people in Sudan or Ukraine or in China, wherever you find yourself. That's a very broad, sweeping look at the public side. On the nonprofit side, there is a growing interest in applying business skills to look at, again, sustainable development, entrepreneurship, microfinance, running a nonprofit with a business that conducting a social enterprise, so a for-profit business that also looks at the impact on the planet or on people as well as the amount of profit they can. That happens in the non-governmental nonprofit sphere. And then a number of private companies, whether they be big banks or medium-sized enterprises, that really value that intersection between international knowledge and business savvy. And tell you a story about when I was at Citibank a few years ago, and they asked general questions about me, and I told them that I have a master's degree in international politics. And they immediately talked about how much they loved having students like that come to work at Citibank because they felt that they could teach them the business side and banking side of things, but understanding how the world worked and how to communicate with different people from around the world and the more subtle nuances of different cultures and different business cultures enabled candidates to be set up much more for success than if they just came from a traditional business background. So there's a lot of interplay in the private space between the need for global knowledge and international knowledge and business savvy. Another aspect there is about the elements of risk and being able to assess risk, even if you're a small business that wants to start to export or grow, really understanding what the factors are that influence how a market is changing and growing and being shaped. These are all things that can come with an understanding of the world and be combined with business knowledge to really propel an organization forward. I think there was also a question earlier about essay questions, but that was the one, unfortunately, that I missed due to some of the background noise.
Okay. Well, you know what? Let's just move on because we do have a couple more questions, Carmen. One is,
Okay.
can you share additional tips on networking with admissions reps, information sessions, and through social media?
Sure. Most of the schools that you're going to be interested in have a Twitter feed, for example, and a Facebook page, at least at this point. And that is where they will publish their webinar information. On all of their websites, they will publish a list of the fairs that they're conducting, and some of them might be on their campus. They all have open visit days where they invite prospective students to come see, to sit in on classes, to talk to faculty and other students and alumni. So it all begins once you've created your short list of schools, and if you follow them on social media or if you visit their websites, they will give you specific details on when their information sessions, webinars, and the events that they're attending, where you will be able to find them. And there's a lot of schools now doing virtual webinars that are specific to their programs, so you should be able to find them throughout the year. We at our association just sponsored the last of our fall recruitment endeavors, and we do a series in New York, in DC, and then in different international locations as well to bring admissions reps face-to-face with students. So you can find these fairs, APSIA or otherwise, in many of the larger cities across the country, and you can zero in on a particular school or just circulate and talk to different admissions reps. But all of that information is going to live on their website and particularly on their social media. Was that the kind of guidance, or were you all looking for something more specific? If you can just chat it to us, we'll let you know.
I believe I sent you a couple more questions. Well, one more. Carmen, can you, I'm sorry, are there certain college university accreditations that we need to be looking for or aware of or beware of?
It's going to vary sector. So schools of public administration and public affairs have an accreditation process. Schools of international affairs, for example, do not. They are all accredited by their regional body and at the university level for academic standards and those sorts of things. But in terms of degree programs specifically, it's going to vary widely depending on the sector in which you're interested in. There is a lot of merit certainly in looking at accreditations, but I would encourage you to distinguish between accreditation and ranking. Most major schools are going to be accredited and be verified by different regional bodies or by their professional body, but that's quite a different thing than ranking, which can involve either subjective factors or broader considerations beyond the quality of the academic program. So I think, for example, looking at the public administration space, the accreditation body there is called NASPA, and they will publish exactly what they're when they accredit a school. So one of the ways to find that certainly is just through Google. Another might be to look at programs, even those that you're not interested in, and to see to what organizations they belong, and then to find out if the schools you're interested in belong to the peer associations or groups of those other schools. So if you have a specific sector, you're going to want to find out who the body is for that sector, and then from there link together the schools that belong to that body.
Hey, Carmen, I actually have Nicholas Fletcher. He wanted to ask you a question. I guess it's just a little more information about his previous question. I'm going to take him off mute now.
Okay.
I simply wanted to get your take on specifically interacting with admissions professionals. Do you strongly advise following up with thank yous via email? Sort of how much is too much? What's the sweet spot to make sure you're displaying how sincere you are about that school, that program, before you oversell yourself?
I think it's a lot like dating. You have to find the right way to show affection without creeping somebody out. So when you reach out to an admissions professional, I would encourage you to either email them and just make a general inquiry, I'd like to speak to you about the program, or if you call the main office line, explain your need and see if you can talk to someone. And if they can talk to you then and there, great. If not, be ready to schedule an appointment and to circle back at another time. I would encourage you, again, because we're looking at a 12-month trajectory, to do this in a year before you're interested in applying, or perhaps in the spring before you're interested in applying. During the fall season is when a lot of admissions folks are on the road and very busy, so it can be more difficult to reach them and more an extra stress on both you and them to try and work in a really personalized conversation. So reaching out by email, by phone, trying to set up that appointment. Once you've got that appointment, use it. Take the time to ask in-depth questions. If there's something that can be answered through their website or through other sources, do that kind of digging ahead of time and to really capitalize on the things that you think you can only get from that individual, or the ways you can draw connections between yourself and that school. Use that time to do those sorts of deeper dives or interpersonal connections that way. Yes, I would encourage you to follow up with an email, or ideally maybe even a note through the classic mail if you really want to go crazy, to say thank you for their time, just as you would with a job interview, or just as you would with someone who'd really extended themselves for you. And if down the line you think you might have a few other questions, it's perfectly fine to circle back. I think they would rather you ask and get the information you need than guess or submit an application that wasn't as strong as it could be. But at the same time, that delicate dance of, if you could answer this on your own, or if you're really willing to remind them that you exist, that's where you can start to cross the line into pestering and being more of a nuisance. So it's not that you shouldn't reach out, but reach out and reach out for a specific deliverable that requires that outreach, not just to shoot the breeze or because you want to remind them that your application is coming. And that can be the line that's hard to thread, but sometimes before you call or before you email, ask yourself, is this the best way I can get this information? Is this the best use of their time? So try to think about it from their perspective.
Okay. Well, Carmen, we don't have any more questions, and it's 2 minutes to 2. I wanted to thank you and have Brother Isaias come on and give us a closing.
Thank you, everyone who attended this webinar on behalf of Alpha Alpha, Peace Corps, and of course, APSIA. We will continue to have these kind of professional development webinars, so look forward to those. And if you have any questions, as Carmen, connect with us via Facebook, Twitter, or the email addresses that are provided in this presentation. Again, thank you, and we look forward to seeing you very soon.